Today we're going to discuss the RF161 form, which is the agreement to show property. This form would be used in instances where the property is not listed, or maybe it's a for sale by owner, and ensures you compensation for bringing an executed contract. So you would have this form filled out first by the seller or the owner of the property in order to ensure compensation and receive written permission to show the property. So it says, in consideration of the services and efforts of, and that would be At Home Realty, a licensed real estate firm, the undersigned enters into this agreement with brokerage on what date, granting broker the right and privilege to show an offer for sale to, and you're going to fill in your buyer's name, from what date to what date, which is the authorization period, and described as what property. The price is the price that the seller has given you and that you may quote to your buyer, which includes the amount of real estate compensation. And then we talk more specifically about how you're compensated. Seller agrees to pay brokerage at the closing of the sale, which includes, but is not limited to, payment of the purchase price in full, execution of a 1031 exchange, execution of a deed of trust, or execution of a promissory note, a real estate compensation of what percent of the negotiated price should prospect enter into during the authorization period. So in other words, if you don't get the offer submitted and signed during the authorization period, they are no longer obligated to pay you. What it also says, though, is that it's the negotiated sales price. So they've given you permission up above to quote a specific price, and then this says that it's whatever price you negotiate. So it doesn't have to be the price that they gave you in the beginning. It does say that you will be considered the procuring cause of the sale, and in the event that the property is sold directly to the seller or by the seller to the prospect within, let's just say, 60 days or 90 days after the expiration of the authorization period, then seller agrees to pay the compensation to broker at the closing of the sale. So if you don't fill in the extended period of time on line 21, then it ends during your authorization period. This says that this agreement is not a seller's agency engagement. So in other words, it says, I'm not representing you, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller. It is limited to the seller's permission given to the broker to show the above property in exchange for compensation. It does not create an agency relationship between the seller and the broker. And it does say that although the broker is not the seller's agent, the broker shall treat the seller honestly and may perform ministerial acts for the seller. It does not prohibit the seller from selling the property directly to another buyer. Seller warrants that the seller presently has title to the property or has full authority to enter into this agreement, and that the seller is going to act in good faith and cooperate with the broker in the showing of the property. Seller authorizes submission of the information to the MLS when property has closed. Seller is responsible for compliance with state or federal law regarding usage of video or audio recording devices. So the seller needs to disclose if they have video or audio recording, and this would be in any transaction. Other provisions: binding effect, entire agreement, modification, and assignment. This agreement shall be for the benefit of and binding upon the parties. Okay? It is the sole and entire agreement between the parties, and no modification shall be binding unless signed by all parties to this agreement. So in other words, you can't say, well, you said I could bring Mr. Smith and I brought Mrs. Jones, so you still owe me a commission. You would need to have a new one signed for each buyer. It is written in accordance with the courts of Tennessee. Equal housing. This property is being sold without regard to race, creed, color, sex, religion, handicap, familial status, or national origin. Severability means that if any portion or provision of this contract is held to be invalid or unenforceable, the rest is still valid. Default. Seller agrees to pay all reasonable attorney fees together with any court costs and expenses which the broker incurs in enforcing any of the seller's obligations to pay compensation under this agreement. The parties hereby agree that all remedies are fair and equitable, and neither party shall assert the lack of mutuality of remedies as a defense in the event of a dispute. Time is of the essence means that time is very important and things need to be executed as quickly as possible. Method of execution. The party agrees that the signatures and initials transmitted by fax, photocopy, email, digital signature are acceptable forms. And then the agent would sign, fill out the brokerage information, and then the seller would sign as also.